Wanju, welcome and hello to this first RAiD Global Community meeting, specifically for the Asia Pacific region. In about 8 hours, we'll have a similar meeting for Europe, Middle East and Africa, and 8 hours after that, another meeting for the United States, well, for all of the Americas, I should say. My name is Matthias Liffers, and I'll be your chair today. And you'll also be hearing from Natasha Simons, Slaine O'Halloran, and Jens Klump, and I'll introduce them as they deliver their presentations. Next slide, please, Andy. Now, I am in Borlu, also known as Perth, Western Australia, and this is Whadjuk Noongar Budja, Whadjuk Noongar country. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present who have kept the languages, the culture and traditions alive for tens of thousands of years. And I extend that respect to any First Nations people here. Next slide, please. So this session is being recorded, but you cannot turn on your video, so that's okay. You can post questions in the chat, but I would very much prefer it if you use the Q&A module. Happy for you to chat away and chat, but if you would really like one of our panelists to answer your question, then please pop it into that chat module. You can ask questions at any time, but we'll answer those questions all after all of the presentations have completed. Next slide, please. We also ask you to follow the ARDC Code of Conduct while being in this webinar. This Code of Conduct ensures that this webinar is a safe, inclusive and welcoming space and that everybody can feel heard and valued. Next slide, please, Andy. So first up, I would like to invite, my director, Natasha Simons, to give us an update about the global state of RAiD. So over to you, Natasha.
Thanks, Matthias. So great to have you all join us on the webinar today. I'm coming to you from Turrbal and Yagara country in Brisbane. And the RAiD service sits in my portfolio of national coordination activities within the ARDC. And so I have been heavily involved in the rollout of RAiD globally alongside and supporting Matthias and the team. So I'm just going to give you an update on what we have got to with RAiD globally. So next. What is RAiD? If you're new to RAiD, RAiD is a persistent identifier for research projects. It's governed by an ISO standard that was released in 2022, and it sits alongside other existing PIDs or persistent identifiers that I think most of you will be familiar with. So I suspect that most of you here have an ORCID, which is for identifying researchers and connecting them to their research works. There's also RAW for identifying research organisations, DOIs for data-related materials, publications, other inputs and outputs into research. And so RAiD sits alongside those identifiers as one connected record. So RAiD is able to link people, organisations, funding and outputs into a versioned history from start to finish. And we are looking in the future to support other scholarly identifiers such as RRID or ARCs. Next. Okay, so what does a RAiD look like? Here is an example RAiD, at least in a nicely visual, conceptual sense. So this particular RAiD, it's real RAiD, and it was created by NESP. So NESP is Australia's National Environmental Science Program. It's an Australian government initiative funding practical applied research into climate and environmental science. And that program combines science and traditional knowledge to help us care for Australia's environment. So in this example, you can see who the collaborating organisations are, and there is a mix there of universities, government departments, CSIRO. You can also see the team that is part of that project, and obviously where you see contributor 1, contributor 2, etc., that has obviously been anonymised for good reasons. There's also technical and research outputs produced by that project. Unfortunately, no data at this point, but lots of reports. And there's also a link there to the research subjects that come under the auspices of this project. In this case, a lot of information about waste, which is important for us to manage well, to keep our environment clean. So that's an example of a RAID. This one doesn't have the dates, a versioning history on it, but we will see examples of that later in the webinar. Next. So I'd like to introduce you to the Global RAiD Operating Alliance. This is an international governance body for RAiD that is just forming now. We had a meeting in Utrecht in the Netherlands last month with these partners and others, and we are forming this Global Alliance. So the Global Alliance is made up of the Australian Research Data Commons, ARDC, as the ISO-appointed Global Registration Authority for RAID, as well as our partners who are operating as RAID registration agencies for their region and their member organisations. So here we have SURF operating for the Netherlands, the San Diego Supercomputer Center in the United States, who are running a pilot in partnership with Lyrasis, and also in Canada, the Digital Research Alliance of Canada. So between all of us, that is the Global RAID Operating Alliance. Next slide, please. Okay, so every RAID is underpinned by DataCite DOI infrastructure. So I'm sure you are familiar with DOIs, the Digital Object Identifiers, and DataCite are a not-for-profit agency running a DOI infrastructure service. And without DataCites as foundational infrastructure, there would be no RAIDs. And so RAID builds on DOI just as DOI builds on the handle system. And I just want to note, it is not just a technical relationship, it's a strategic partnership between the ARDC and DataCite, a foundational partnership for RAID that is working very well. And I'll also mention there that ARDC runs a DataCite DOI consortium for Australia, and I'm also a member of the DataCite Executive Board, which helps to cement that partnership as well. Next slide. Okay, so RAID is also a growing, I was going to say glowing, it's also glowing. It's a growing and glowing global federation, and it's built to scale globally. So here's an example of the adoption in Australia and New Zealand. Also the Netherlands, as I said, SURF is launching in Q3 2026. We have a pilot in North America that is run through the San Diego Supercomputer Center and Lyrasis, as I mentioned, and Canada are coming along the line later down the track. There are also communities forming who wish to use RAID in the Czech Republic, in France, and in the United Kingdom, where they are looking at how to assign RAIDs to projects that are about non-traditional research outputs, such as creative works. Next. So RAID connects to your ORCID profile. This is something that was recently set up. So you can actually print a RAID onto your ORCID, or publish a RAID onto your ORCID profile. And so far we have 233 ORCID IDs linked to RAID records. That was as of May this year. Next slide, please. So here's an example of well, in this case, it's actually a PhD student who has put a RAID onto her record. You'll see right at the bottom there that you can see the RAID with the tick next to it, and the information about the RAID project that this person is engaged with. So I have to mention there that it is done as an opt-in as per all of ORCID activities. So a researcher needs to authorize RAID to be allowed to print that RAID. They have to agree that RAID can be printed onto their ORCID record in order for it to show there. So they have all the control over this. Next one. Okay, RAiD is also integrating into research management workflows. So I'm not sure how much how familiar you are with these different products, but these are the different products who have integrated with RAiD. So you'll see there MyLaminin, which is a research data management software that has come out of Canada, Redbox, which is managed by QSIF, and RSpace. So RSpace recently did a very nice integration with RAiD. And if you go to the RSpace blog, you will be able to see a very short video on how RAiD is integrated into RSpace. And we are working with other integrators as well. So Dataverse is another one that's coming down the line. And I know that there are Dataverse users in Australia. Next. Okay, and the last one is follow RAiD. We have set up some social media accounts, so follow, like, subscribe for our Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and Mastodon accounts. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And of course, you'll be staying on for the Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions about the global status of RAiD, then please do pop them into the Q&A. Next up, it's me, my turn. So as product manager of RAiD, I'd like to give you all a very quick update on the ARDC RAiD service. So the ARDC has this dual role with RAiD. So we are governing the global rollout. We are working with partners around the world to make sure that RAiD is available to researchers everywhere. But at the same time, we also operate the ARDC RAiD service. Next slide, please. And the ARDC RAiD service is available to publicly funded and not-for-profit research organisations in Australia and New Zealand at no cost. It's absolutely free of charge. If you are already a member of the ARDC Data Site Consortium, then you can access the RAiD service without any further legal agreements needing to be signed. All you have to do is email us, and I'll put an email in the chat. So email services@ardc.edu.au saying you would like to use RAiD and we can get you hooked up. If you are not already a member of the ARDC Data Site Consortium, then there is a small legal agreement we call a service schedule that needs to be signed, but the cost of the service is still $0 for publicly funded and not-for-profit research organisations in Australia and New Zealand. Currently, logging into the RAiD service is available via AAF. So for Australian research organisations, that means you can use your institutional credentials. We also support Google account logins and also ORCID logins. And because an ORCID is freely available to anybody and takes 2 minutes to create, that means that anybody can log into the service once they're authorised. We are also looking into adding Tuakiri authentication for our friends from across the ditch. So keep an eye out for that when that's available. Next slide, please. So the ARDC RAiD service, at this point, we have 11 organisations in Australia and New Zealand that are customers. And between them, they have what we call service points. So an organisation can have one or more service point, and a service point is a collection of RAiDs with the people who are authorised to create and update those RAiDs. So, for example, if in your organisation you have two separate groups that would like to use RAiD for different purposes, you can grant both of those groups access in a way that they can't accidentally interfere with each other. And this is also a great way to work with perhaps multiple systems that are integrating with RAiD. Our customers include universities, research institutions, and we also have a government funder of research. As Natasha showed in her example slide, the National Environmental Science Program that belongs to Australia's Federal Department of Climate. You know what? I've forgotten what the acronym stands for. DCCEEW. DCCEEW. Sorry, I might need to look that one up. I always call it DCCEEW. RAiD is also recommended by the NHMRC and MRFF Open Science Policy. And if you check the ARDC's YouTube channel, you can see a recording from a webinar that took place last week talking about persistent identifiers in the Open Science Policy. And then also RAiD is identified as one of the 5 priority PIDs in the Australian National PID Strategy, alongside DOIs, RAWs, and ORCIDs. Next slide, please. So when I put this slide deck together last week, we had 605 RAiDs in the ARDC RAiD service. There were 535 RAiDs with open access metadata and 70 RAiDs with embargoed metadata. What this means is that when you create a RAiD, you can say whether you would like that to be fully open from the beginning or whether you would like the information about that project to be kept embargoed for up to 18 months. This lets you create a RAiD and use a RAiD before you're prepared to fully share all of the information about that. And I see that somebody in the chat has actually spelled out DQ for me. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Now, accessing the service, there are a few different ways to access it. There is a friendly web app for humans to log in and create and update their RAIDs. There is also a robust API that allows machine-to-machine RAID minting and updating, and this is what those vendors that Natasha mentioned use. We also have documentation available at the ARDC documentation site to introduce you to RAID, walk you through how to sign up to the service or how your organization signs up to the service, and also how to log in. We also have a monthly data archive that we upload. So every month on the first of the month, all of the open metadata for in the ARDC RAiD service are packaged up and sent to Zenodo. And this is a great way to download the entire RAiD dataset to play with, or the entire RAiD metadata set, I should say, to play with. And to be honest, I've been having a lot of fun in the past few days using a large language model to make queries of the RAiD metadata set and producing visualizations for me. Next slide, please. Now, what I'm very, very happy to announce at this meeting is RIGA, the RAiD Implementers Interest Group. Sorry, I should have spelled that out on this slide. RIGA is a community for ARDC RAiD service customers, and especially not just existing customers, but organisations in Australia and New Zealand who are interested in actively exploring or implementing RAiD. And I invite you all now to express your interest in joining RIGA. We've got a Google form there that you can log into. Sorry, you don't need to log into the form. You can access the form and express interest on behalf of your organisation. Now, it's very important for me to say that expressing interest is not a firm commitment of membership. So it really is just an EOI. I'll be having a look at all of the EOIs and getting in touch with those organisations who would like to join up to talk about their aspirations, how they'd like to use RAiD, and we'll use this as a way to build a really engaged community in Australia and New Zealand for using RAiD. And I have to admit, we've been heavily inspired by the US pilot community, who have been doing a fantastic job over there. I won't name names because we're in a recorded session here, but I'd like to thank the RAiD US pilot team for that inspiration. Next slide, please. So yes, feel free to get in touch with us at the ARDC if you would like to use the RAiD service. Otherwise, that's it for me. For any questions, please do, as I said, pop them into the Q&A. But I would now like to hand over to the next speaker. So Slaine O'Halloran is a Scientific Support Officer at the Raine Study, which is a long-term cohort study at the University of Western Australia. But you know what? Slaine will introduce the Raine Study much better than I will. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. So yeah, thank you for having me to talk about the Raine Study. So this will be our use case. If you can go to the next slide, please. So start off with an acknowledgement of country. We'd like to acknowledge our participants and their families. I'm coming to you from Whadjuk Noongar country in Perth or Boorloo. And I'd like to pay my respects to traditional custodians of the land. I'd also like to thank our participant, Danielle Nelson, who created this artwork for us. Next slide, please. So what is the RAiN Study? We were established in Perth in 1989, and we are an unincorporated joint venture between the 5 universities in WA, so University of Western Australia, Curtin, Edith Cowan University, Murdoch University, and the University of Notre Dame, as well as the Kids Research Institute of Australia and the Women and Infants Research Foundation. So quite a lot of partner organisations. We are multi-generational. So we have recently recruited our 3rd generation. We have the original participants recruited into the study, Gen 1, who were pregnant mothers. We have their offspring, who are our index participants, who are Gen 2. And then now we have their children, Gen 3, and the other biological parent of those Gen 3 children, Gen 2b. So over the last 35 years, we have collected extensive data, health, mental health, behavior, environment, social, education, and work outcomes. We have a very rich data set with in excess of 30,000 phenotypic data points, 30 million genetic data points, in excess of 200,000 biosamples, so blood, saliva, feces, cord blood, teeth. And we're also in the process of acquiring linked data to WA administrative data sets. So as you can imagine, with all of that, we have a number of different research partners, collaborators, and we have at present over 800 publications since 1993 utilizing RAiN study data across multiple different health domains. Next slide, please. So why RAiD? We have basically been looking for a way to incorporate all of that. Sorry, I don't know if there are animations with the slide, and if you can just pop those through. Thank you. Yeah, so we've been looking for something that can capture all of that sort of partnership and network of partners, collaborators, institutions, and as well as all of our outputs. Initially, we will be looking at using a singular RAiD so that we can have everything in the one place for the first time. And we're hoping that that will enhance discoverability of the RAiN study for researchers and possible partner organizations. We're also hoping that it can be somewhere we can direct policymakers and government to see sort of what is the RAiN study in a snapshot, and also possibly enhance discoverability for evidence for policy. Finally, we're hoping it will demonstrate the sort of extensive network of RAiN study research. And one of the advantages for us with RAiD is the fact that in the future, we will be able to mint other RAiDs for sort of individual projects and still have outputs across both. So you can see everything in the one place, or you can also see sort of sub-projects and the outputs of those specific sub-projects. So RAiD has been a really useful and interesting prospect for us, and something that we're quite excited to be involved with. Next slide, please, which is just my final thank you. Thank you for having us present, and also thank you for RAiD in general.
Thank you very much, Slaine. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you folks do with RAiD. 800 outputs on a single RAiD. I'm just trying to think to myself how I could visualize that, because that visualization that Natasha showed earlier, which had only 12 reports on it, that was already busy enough. And you know, it might be that I have to zoom out even more in my visualization. So if you have any questions for Slaine, please do put them in the Q&A module. But then I would very much like to now hand over to Jens Klump from AuScope. Sorry, I have lost my screen that told me exactly what you do, Jens. Sorry, here we go. You're the group leader for in the exploration through cover, and also program leader of the AuScope virtual research environments at SARA and AuScope. So over to you, please, Jens.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to speak today and briefly introduce our use case for RAiD for AuScope. Next slide, please. But before I dive into the details, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we are working on meeting on today. For me, that's the Whadjuk Noongar people here in the Perth region, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. So next slide, please. For those who don't know what AuScope is one of the organizations involved in the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy that funds Australian research infrastructures. It provides infrastructure for Earth and geospatial science, tools, services, analytical tools, research campaigns. Next slide, please. And all those components together form what AuScope calls the downward-looking telescope that has different components that allow us to build a comprehensive image of the Earth and its interior. Next slide, please. So this collaborative approach with many components and many partners leads to quite a number of programs that AuScope supports. The ones that are in colored circles are the ones that are operational, and you can see that there are quite a number of other components that are still planned that will come in the future. And this leads me on to the question of why is RAiD helpful in this context. Next slide, please. So AuScope funds and co-invests into many activities, and this part co-invests will become important later when we think about how do we govern this system. Why AuScope wants to have this is to track the outputs and impact of the activity it supports. And so firstly, identify the research activities, and then link to it, as you've heard in the previous examples, the principal investigators and contributors through the ORCIDs. AuScope also funds instruments, and so for that we've built an instrument register for AuScope using the PIDINST schema. There will be literature outputs, of course, software data that is partially supported through the AuScope data repository using DOIs to identify those outputs. Also, we want to use this to link samples that are used in AuScope supported research being identified by the International Generic Sample Number. And this is again supported by the AuScope sample catalog. And something that has come up in our discussions in the scoping of the RAiD register is that we want to use the RAiD register to also link to these activities the agreements with indigenous traditional owners, so that we can in this way support the care principles of indigenous data sovereignty. Next slide, please. So the work on this RAiD register has just started, and we expect it to go into operation in mid-2027. While the technology isn't rocket science, the governance is quite complex, and we still have some open questions. One of them I can already see in the Q&A, to who gets to add and update RAiD records when you have a system that supports many different partners and many activities that have intersecting partners, but it's not run through one central organization. Then how will this system then interface with other information systems? We've heard about the ORCIDs, dataset integration, Crossref, others. There's some questions that we need to work out, maybe also with the current research information systems in the universities. And this question of how will RAiD work for activities with many project partners where others might be assigning RAiDs to the activities, and we also want to follow them. Some open questions that we need to work through in this scoping study that kicks off the project now. So this is happening now. On the technology side, our candidate software for the RAiD register is the CCAN framework that we've already used for the AuScope data repository, the sample catalog, and the instrument register. And that's our brief introduction into our emerging work on RAiD for AuScope. Thanks, Matthias.
Great, thank you very much, Jens. If you have any questions for Jens or Slaine or me or Natasha, please pop them into the chat. So we've also already got a number of questions. And to be honest, it makes me think that I should have put in a bit more detail about the RAiD metadata schema and exactly how that works. But I think a deep dive into RAiD metadata would make an excellent webinar session in the coming months, so I can look into scheduling that. Now, for the time being, actually, Andy, would you be able to go back to Natasha's presentation to the visualization of the RAiD, please? I think it was her third slide. And then while you're doing that, now it looks like all of the questions are actually ones that are to be answered by me. And I will go through them one by one. Let me see. Okay, so the first question, I'm going to try and cluster them together, so I'm talking about a particular topic at a time. Sorry, the next slide, I think it was here, Andy. Yeah, that's the one. Fantastic. So the first question, I'm interested in the models of a RAiD per grant versus a RAiD for a full research program. Is either recommended over the other? Can grants be linked to a RAiD? Can RAiDs for individual projects be linked to an overarching RAiD? Okay, so this visualization of this particular project in the Sustainable Communities and Waste hub, if you look at the central RAiD there, so we've got that visualization, the central RAiD. Now, in this particular use case, the NESP Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub also has a RAiD, and the NESP program, the National Environmental Science Program, also has a RAiD. So what we've hidden a little bit here is this hierarchical overview of there's this National Environmental Science Program, and then within that, there are a number of hubs, and each one has its own RAiD. And then each hub then further has a number of projects within it, and each of those projects having a RAiD. So RAiDs can be related to each other in a number of different relationships, in the same way that one project can continue another project, one project can be a sub-project within a project, or you can have an overarching program that encompasses many projects. When it comes to grants, now we try to be very careful about talking about what kind of PID is used for a grant versus the kind of PID used for a project. They are different things if you think about them, about the concept. So a grant is a bundle of resources, typically money, that researchers get in order to do research. So you get the grant, but then the research project is the activity that takes place using that grant. Now, I'm very happy that the Australian Research Council will be minting DOIs for its grants very soon. I believe we'll see the first DOIs for their grants next year. I unfortunately couldn't just attend the ARC Open Access policy webinar in which they outlined it all, but if you were there, or if you weren't there rather, I'm sure that they'll have a recording of that webinar soon. Now, a grant DOI, a grant ID, can be associated with a RAiD as an input of research, in the same way that each of the 10 research outputs on this project have a DOI. If a grant has a DOI, you can attach that as well, quite happily. And then when you combine that with the ability to relate to different RAiDs, you can model an entire program of work within the RAiD system. And what that model looks like, to be honest, is up to what you want to get out of RAiD by maintaining this model. Okay, let me just check through. We've had a few other questions jump in. So let's get a bit more into the metadata side of things. I presume that part of linking DOIs to RAiDs will require publishers and database vendors to be able to accept and work with RAiDs. Has any work been done with publishers and vendors to accommodate this? So linking PIDs can generally be done in two directions. So you can, within, say, a DataCite DOI, assert relationships to other things. So in the DataSite DOI metadata, you can say, here's a related DOI. Here is the author of this thing that the DOI refers to. Similarly with RAiD, you can, in the RAiD metadata, assert connections out to other things. Here are the contributors, here are the organizations, and here are the inputs and outputs of this project. So when it comes to adding DOIs to the RAiD metadata, that direction of linking, that already exists. So RAiD can accept a number of different identifiers, and as Natasha mentioned, we're working on adding more kinds of identifiers. And I'm hoping that the fundamental work to enable that will be deployed this week, but then you'll still need to wait a little more to see those extra identifiers. We'll need to enable them one by one. Now, coming the other way, and other PIDs referring to RAIDs, this admittedly is still a work in progress. DataSite DOIs do explicitly have a related identifier type RAID, so you can make an explicit reference from a DataSite DOI to a RAID. But some of the in ORCID metadata, we are writing RAIDs to ORCID, so ORCID can also link back to a RAID. Now, the other persistent identifiers, we're still working on that. So watch this space. When it comes to your institutional systems, that, for example, mean DataSite DOIs, whether your institutional systems can put that into that DataSite metadata, that depends on the integration that your vendor has put into place there. And I'm more than happy to work with vendor user groups, for example. So I had a question the other day from a Figshare user who was very interested in building some groundswell among the Figshare user group to get RAID integrated there. I have to admit, we, the ARDC, we're not customers of your vendors. You're the customers of your vendors, and vendors will listen to you about the features that you want in your software. I'm more than happy to be included in any conversations, but the ARDC will rely heavily on vendor user groups. Thank you for that question. Okay, let's see, more metadata stuff. Okay, cool. Have you had any interest in organizations implementing, adopting, or adapting the RAiD schema internally? So this person is exploring the possibility of internal schema implementation to be able to register sensitive or commercial in confidence projects as RAIDs in an internal or private system. Okay, this actually raises a very good point, and there's also some questions about embargoed metadata in a moment. RAID is a system for its primary point is to publicly share information about research projects in a way that can be accessed by multiple systems. RAID is not intended to be an internal identifier that contains secret or commercial in confidence information. To be quite honest, we don't want secret information. We're not equipped to keep your secrets secret. And in fact, the fact that you're telling, if you send secret metadata to ARDC, then it's not really a secret anymore. But I absolutely have spoken to organizations that are looking at this and what is the relationship between an internal project tracking system that does need to handle sensitive or commercial in confidence projects versus RAID, which is about publicly sharing information about that project. And some of these organizations have chosen to adopt the RAID metadata schema because, to be honest, we've worked on this metadata schema for quite a few years and it has been refined quite well to record information about projects. But these organizations also might want to embellish some things, add some more metadata fields for their own internal systems. So look, we're more than happy for organizations to be inspired by the RAID metadata schema for internal use, because that might also make it easier for them to then, in the future, when those projects are not quite as sensitive anymore, they've been declassified, it would make it easier for those organizations to mint RAIDs for them when they're ready to do so. I hope that's answered your question. Okay, sorry, still lots of questions for me specifically. You're going to have to put up with my voice for a little bit longer. Okay, next question is about the RAID embargo. So if a RAID is created and an embargo is applied, what is visible publicly? Is it only the RAID ID? So we have specified the exact fields that are visible when a RAID has been embargoed. One is the RAID ID itself. The second is the organization that the RAID belongs to. Then we have a message about the embargo. So there is a free text field that can be used if the embargo is applied to explain perhaps the nature of the embargo, why the embargo exists. And then finally, the final field that is displayed is the embargo expiry date. So no other information about the project is made public, not the title, not the contributors, not the organizations other than the owner, not the subjects. It is kept private until the embargo date comes along, and then it is unembargoed. I should also say this embargo can be applied for at most 18 months. That is a hard limit. We do not think that permanently embargoed RAIDs or permanently private projects have a place in the RAID system at the moment. Okay, sorry, more questions. Let's go to, there's a question about integrations here. So what other integrations are you considering? We would be interested in LabArchives and Thermo Fisher's Sample Manager. Look, we are happy for any vendor of any research-related software product to develop an integration with RAID. However, typically, the ARDC is not a customer of these systems, so it's not necessarily, we don't have the best influence with the vendor to get that happening. So we would be very happy to work with you, as I said before, to talk to your vendors, give them requirements, how RAID works, and how they could integrate RAID into their systems. But it is up to customers of these systems to initiate that process. Now, Andy, could you fast forward a few slides to the existing integrations we have? Back one. There we go. So we do have these existing integrations with my Laminin, Redbox, and RSpace. And I did mention that the RAID US pilot is looking at an integration with Dataverse, and I know Dataverse is used by a few organizations here. I'm very, very happy to support anybody who would like to develop a RAID plugin or integration with open source software products especially. Some of you may be able to do that yourselves. We have documentation available for integrators. Okay, we've got 3 questions left, and looking at the time, I've still got a few minutes as well. And I see that the chat has been quite active. I'll have a look at that in a moment once I've gotten through the chat. Or if there's anything in particular that somebody wants to get my attention, then at me. So which universities are actively implementing RAIDs? So that's a tricky one to answer because I'm not sure what you mean by actively implementing. I can tell you the public information that's available about the universities that have minted RAIDs. And in fact, I can share a link in the chat where you can access all of the public RAIDs that have been minted in the ARDC RAiD service. So every single public RAID in the ARDC RAiD service has a landing page with all of the metadata available, and you can explore that to your heart's content to see the organizations that have been doing this. I have to give a shout out to the University of Notre Dame, Australia, who is one of our earliest customers of RAiD and has been happily minting RAiDs for several years, for the past 3 years. In fact, they have minted 214, so a good third of all of the public RAiDs that we have at this stage. I'm afraid I can't comment on any institutions that are in the process of implementing RAiDs, but for those who are joining the RAiD Implementers Interest Group, that will be a space where you can share ideas with each other. Sorry, I should have. There we go, mark that. All right, more questions for me. Oh, another one's popped in as well. So, question, if researchers added to a specific service point can access any RAiD records within that service point, won't that mean that RAiD will veer towards a service point per project, given RAiD record owners will likely not want their records accessed or modified by those not directly with their project? Okay, thanks for the question, and this is actually a really good one and very timely. So at the moment, the access control model of RAiD is based around that service point. There is theoretically no limit to the number of service points an organization can have. But we implemented that model first because it was to be honest, it was the easiest implementation for access control. But we have heard from quite a few partners that that model won't work for that situation described in the question, where managing RAiDs, if that's devolved down to the absolute researcher level, then really the access needs to be managed on a per RAiD basis. I'm very happy to say that we are working on that feature. We are going to take our time to deliberately work through that feature slowly and surely to make sure that we get it right. And in fact, just last week, the technical specification landed on my desk, written by one of our business analysts, and I'll be looking through that specification to make sure that it does meet the needs of our users, not just the researchers, but also the institutions that really own or other custodians of those RAiDs. Okay. So then, just a couple of questions left. So can digital research infrastructures used by the research activity be linked to a RAiD? Yes, in multiple ways. So RAiD does really like to revolve around persistent identifiers. So if a digital research infrastructure has a persistent identifier, it can be linked to the RAiD. At the moment, that is through a RAW or a DOI. So you can research infrastructures can mint DOIs for their instruments, or they can, or most will have a RAW as well, and they can be associated with a RAiD. Now, we are actively working on adding support for other persistent identifiers. So, for example, RRID, which is particularly popular in the biosciences as a persistent identifier for a whole host of different kinds of concepts in research. We're working on that support, and we're hoping to have that available certainly by the end of this year. But that linking is done through a PID of some kind. So the research infrastructures would need to consider how they adopt PIDs in their workflows as well. And then, I've run out of water. I'll get some again soon after this webinar. Last question for me. Are there any recommendations about when in the research lifecycle a RAiD should be minted? The flippant answer is anytime is okay. The RAiD metadata schema has few required fields. And in fact, to mint a RAiD, there's only 4 fields that you need. One is a name for the project. The second is a starting date, which can be as broad as a year. The third is a human contributor, typically the person who thought of the project. And the final one is the embargo status, whether that's open access or embargoed. We deliberately chose a very small set of mandatory metadata so that you could theoretically mint a RAID during the ideation stage of a project before you've even applied for any grants. So you can use that RAID already when working on grant applications, collecting together inputs into the project and what have you. Now, some organizations have chosen to mint RAIDs right at the very end of a project when they're collecting everything together. And in fact, that's how the Redbox integration works. So Redbox happens at the end stage, the archival stage of a project. When the research outputs are being collected, that's when Redbox can mint a RAID for you. And now I have actually answered all of the questions, and I feel like I've been talking solidly for half an hour. And I've also been told we don't have any unanswered questions in the chat, and I'm looking forward to reviewing that once the webinar's done. And I think that leads us very closely to the end of the webinar. So we invite you once again to follow RAiD on our socials, brand new socials on Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or Mastodon. Please do get in touch with us if you are interested in signing up for RAiD, if you'd like to join Rigor. Absolutely. Sorry, I've already put the server. I'll put that email address in the chat again. So yeah, please email services@ardc.edu.au if you have any further questions about RAiD. Thank you very much for your time.